What would you do if you suddenly lost everything and no one was there to help you? Imagine being kicked out of a shopping mall, feeling completely alone, with nothing left to lose. How far would you go to survive? Meet Timmy, a poor kid from the rough side of town. He had one dream, to change his life and the lives of his mother and little sister. But things weren't easy. His family was struggling, and Timmy often had to face the harsh reality of living in a world where not everyone had the same opportunities. One cold afternoon, with nothing but the hope of finding a part-time job to help his family, Timmy walked into a local shopping mall. But things didn't go as planned. As soon as he stepped inside, a security guard spotted him and immediately began following him. Timmy tried to brush it off, thinking nothing of it at first. But soon, the guard stopped. Hey you, the guard barked, his voice cold and stern. How you need to leave, now. Confused, Timmy tried to explain. I'm just looking for a job, he stammered, his heart racing. But the guard wasn't having it. You're not welcome here. Get out, he snapped, stepping closer. Timmy stood there, frozen. His stomach dropped. Was this really happening? Why was he being treated like this? In that moment, he realized something. It wasn't just about being kicked out of a mall. It was about being invisible, pushed aside because of who he was and where he came from. As Timmy turned to leave, defeated and humiliated, something unexpected happened. A voice called out from behind him. Hey, is everything okay? Timmy froze. He turned around slowly, not believing his eyes. Standing there, looking right at him, was none other than Keanu Reeves, the famous actor, the one person Timmy had admired for years. Keanu smiled, a calm and genuine expression on his face. What's going on? Why are you being kicked out? Timmy's heart skipped a beat. He couldn't believe it. This was the last person he'd ever expect to meet under these circumstances. But Keanu's presence was reassuring, a small spark of hope in an otherwise dark moment. Before Timmy could say anything, Keanu's voice interrupted his thoughts. Come on, let's talk. And just like that, everything Timmy knew about his life, his struggles, and his dreams was about to change in ways he could never have imagined. But before we dive deeper into Timmy's incredible journey, I hope you'll take a moment to subscribe to our channel. It's because of your support that we can continue sharing these life-changing stories. Don't miss what happens next. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Timmy had never imagined that his life would take a turn like this. Born and raised in a rundown part of town, he was all too familiar with hardship. Life was a constant struggle for him and his family. His mother, always working late shifts at a diner, barely had time to care for him and his younger sister, Lily. They lived in a cramped apartment, one where the walls felt like they might fall down any minute, and the smell of mold always seemed to linger in the air. Despite everything, Timmy was determined to make a difference. He wasn't like some of the kids in his neighborhood who gave up, who didn't care. Timmy had dreams that seemed unreachable. He wanted to escape the cycle of poverty, to get a good job and provide for his family. He wanted his mother to smile, to not have to worry about how to pay the bills or whether there would be enough food for the week. He wanted Lily to have a better life, to not grow up feeling trapped the way he did. Every day after school, Timmy would go on job searches. He'd walk around town, asking around, sending applications to every fast food joint, every store, every place he could think of. Most of the time, he didn't even get a reply, but he kept trying. He couldn't afford to stop. His family needed him. But today, everything had gone wrong. After leaving school early, Timmy had decided to visit the shopping mall. It wasn't about shopping for himself. He was hoping to find a part-time job. He had heard there were openings in some of the stores, and he thought it might be his chance to prove himself, to change things. When he stepped through those automatic, sliding doors, the bright lights and shiny floors were almost blinding. It was a world so different from the one he was used to, and for a moment he felt a glimmer of hope. But that hope quickly vanished when he was spotted by the security guard. His heart sank as the guard's eyes locked onto him, and the words that followed were cold and dismissive. Timmy knew he had no power in situations like this. He was just a poor kid, and people like him weren't exactly welcome in places like this. The embarrassment, the shame, it all crashed down on him in that moment. As the guard pushed him out, Timmy felt like a nobody, invisible and discarded. That's when Keanu appeared. Timmy couldn't believe it at first. Keanu Reeves, the actor whose movies had always made him feel like there was something more to life than the pain of his daily existence, was standing right in front of him. He had always admired Keanu, not just for his acting, but for the kindness he seemed to radiate in everything he did. Keanu wasn't just an actor. To Timmy, he represented something greater. He was the symbol of someone who had everything but still chose to do good, to be kind, and to use his platform to make the world a little better. Now, here he was, talking to Timmy, asking if everything was okay. In a world that had pushed Timmy to the edge, Keanu's kindness was like a lifeline thrown out into the storm. Timmy didn't know what to say at first. He was still in shock, his mind racing. I don't know why they kicked me out, Timmy muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. I was just looking for a job, and I swear I wasn't doing anything wrong. Keanu nodded, his face serious but compassionate. I can see that. But sometimes people don't give others the chance to explain. They just make assumptions. Timmy felt a lump form in his throat. Here was a man, a stranger to him, but someone who seemed to understand the pain he had been carrying for so long. In that moment, Timmy realized something. He wasn't alone. Keanu's expression softened, and he stepped a little closer. Listen, how about we grab some coffee? Let's talk. You don't have to be embarrassed. Everyone's been there. It was such a simple offer, but to Timmy, it felt like the world had shifted. Keanu wasn't just offering him coffee. He was offering him an opportunity to be heard, to feel seen, to not be judged based on where he came from. The two of them walked out of the mall and found a small cafe nearby. Keanu ordered a couple of lattes, and they sat at a corner table, where Keanu encouraged Timmy to talk. For the first time in a long while, Timmy opened up, about his family, his dreams, and how he felt like he was always fighting a battle he couldn't win. And Keanu listened, genuinely and attentively without interrupting. After a while, Keanu leaned back in his chair, and with a smile he said, "You've got a lot of heart, Timmy. I can tell you want to do something good. And you will, but sometimes you need a little help to get there." Timmy looked up, confused. "Help? From who?" Keanu's smile widened. "From me." Timmy's eyes widened in disbelief. He was certain he had heard wrong. Was Keanu really offering to help him? A poor kid from a run-down neighborhood, with nothing to offer but a dream. But Keanu wasn't done. "You've got potential, Timmy, and I think I can help you realize it." But what Keanu did next would shock Timmy, and you too. Don't miss the next part of this incredible journey. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you won't miss what happens next. Trust me, you'll want to know how this story unfolds. Timmy's life, which had always been defined by struggle and disappointment, was now on the brink of something completely unexpected. Keanu Reeves, the man he had admired for years, had just offered to help him. It was almost too good to be true. After their coffee, Keanu didn't let Timmy leave empty-handed. He handed him a card with his number on it, asking Timmy to call him any time. "I'll be around if you need me," Keanu said, his voice calm yet filled with sincerity. Timmy, still trying to process everything, took the card without saying much. As soon as he left the cafe, he stared at it, wondering if he was dreaming. For days, Timmy kept the card in his pocket, unsure of what to do. Could he really call Keanu? He didn't want to bother him, especially considering how kind Keanu had been to him out of nowhere. Timmy had grown up in a world where people didn't just help others without wanting something in return. It was too good to be true. But despite his doubts, Timmy finally decided to call Keanu one evening. He wasn't sure what to say, but he knew he had to take this opportunity. This was his chance to change everything. After a couple of rings, Keanu picked up. "Hey, Timmy," Keanu's familiar voice came through. "What's going on?" Timmy swallowed hard, his mind racing. I don't know. I just wanted to thank you again for what you did. I wasn't sure if I should even be calling, but I've been thinking a lot about what you said." Keanu's voice was calm and reassuring. "Timmy, I'm glad you called. Listen, you've got potential, but it's going to take more than just dreaming. It's going to take action. I can't do this for you, but I can show you the way. Are you ready to take the next step? Timmy nodded, even though Keanu couldn't see him. His heart was pounding in his chest. This was the moment where things could either fall apart or start coming together. I'm ready, Timmy said, his voice filled with determination he hadn't felt in a long time. I don't know what to do next, but I'm willing to try. Keanu didn't hesitate. All right, I have a few people I know in the industry. You'll need to work hard, but I'm going to help you get your foot in the door. It's going to take time, but this is just the beginning. For the next several weeks, Timmy followed Keanu's advice. He worked hard to build his resume, took up odd jobs, and even started going to a local community college to learn some basic skills. Keanu connected him with a few people, including a mentor who worked in the entertainment industry. The connections were real, and the opportunities felt genuine. But as Timmy's life slowly began to change, so did the people around him. Some of his old friends started distancing themselves. They didn't understand why Timmy was working so hard, trying to learn new things, meeting people who seemed to be from a different world. They mocked him, calling him a sellout, telling him he was wasting his time trying to become someone else. At first, Timmy tried to ignore the comments, but the more he heard it, the more it started to weigh on him. Was he betraying where he came from? Was he really changing? Every time he started to feel good about his progress, someone would knock him down. One day, Timmy sat down in his small apartment, feeling the pressure mounting. He hadn't heard from Keanu in a while, and despite his progress, he was starting to feel like everything was falling apart. The path Keanu had shown him wasn't as clear as it had seemed. There were too many people questioning him, too many voices telling him to stop trying to be something he wasn't. The world he had come from was still pulling him back. He pulled out the card Keanu had given him, staring at it for a long moment. The weight of the decision before him felt heavier than ever. Should he keep going, or was he better off just returning to the life he knew? Timmy was about to make the call when his phone rang. It was an unknown number. Timmy, Keanu's voice came through once again. How's it going? Timmy hesitated, then sighed. I don't know, Keanu. I've been trying, but it feels like I'm losing everything. My friends don't get it. They think I'm changing, that I'm forgetting who I am. I don't know what to do anymore. Keanu was silent for a moment, as if considering his words carefully. Timmy, change isn't easy, and the people around you, they'll either understand or they won't. But the most important thing is that you understand who you are. If you want to change your life, it's not about fitting into someone else's world. It's about creating your own. You're not betraying anyone by trying to better yourself. You're honoring where you came from by showing that it's possible to rise above it. Timmy felt a wave of relief wash over him. Keanu's words were like a breath of fresh air in the middle of a storm. Timmy realized he didn't have to choose between his old life and his new opportunities. He could have both. It would be a tough journey, but Keanu was right. The only way forward was to embrace who he was and build the future he wanted. One step at a time. I get it now, Timmy said, his voice more confident than before. Thank you, Keanu. Keanu chuckled softly. Any time, Timmy. Now let's keep moving forward. So, what's next for Timmy? Will he find a way to navigate the pressures around him and make his dreams come true? Or will the world he's trying to escape pull him back? To find out what happens, make sure to subscribe and stay tuned for the next chapter. Timmy woke up early the next morning, his heart racing with excitement and nervous anticipation. Keanu's words had given him a renewed sense of purpose, and for the first time in a long while, he felt like he was walking down a path that had a clear destination. But it wasn't going to be easy. He had his first meeting with one of Keanu's industry connections that afternoon. A talent manager named Rachel, who worked with actors, producers, and artists, was scheduled to meet him at a local cafe. Timmy was supposed to bring his resume, his new portfolio, and a list of his goals. He had spent the last few days preparing himself, trying to figure out how to sell himself in a world that seemed so foreign and intimidating. As he walked to the cafe, he couldn't help but feel a sense of fear creeping in. He had spent his whole life being told he wasn't enough, that people like him never made it out of places like this, but he had promised himself he wouldn't go back to the life he had before. He had to fight. This meeting, this moment, it was everything. When he arrived, Rachel was already seated at a small corner table, flipping through some papers. She looked up as Timmy walked in and smiled. It wasn't a fake smile, it was warm, and that made Timmy feel a little better. "You must be Timmy," she said, extending her hand. "It's nice to finally meet you." Timmy shook her hand, his palms sweaty. "Yeah, nice to meet you too," he managed to say, his voice sounding more nervous than he wanted it to. Rachel motioned for him to sit, and as they got settled, Timmy handed over his resume and portfolio. Rachel scanned the papers quickly, then looked up at him, her expression serious. "You've got some potential, Timmy," she said, pausing. "But it's clear that you're still figuring out what you want. You've got a lot of passion, but you need to channel it. You're not going to get anywhere if you don't focus." Timmy nodded, trying to calm the swirling thoughts in his head. "I know. I've been working hard. I'm trying to figure it all out." Rachel leaned back in her chair and studied him carefully. "Tell me, Timmy, what do you really want out of this? I know you've got dreams, but what's your plan?" Timmy hesitated. He had been asked this question before, but it felt different this time. He had never really considered a clear answer, always just moving from one day to the next, hoping something would come through. But now, after everything he'd learned, he knew what he wanted. He had to be clear, not just for Rachel, but for himself. "I want to build a future," he said, his voice gaining strength. "I want to show my mom and my sister that they don't have to struggle anymore. I want to make a name for myself, not just for the money, but to prove that people like me can make it. I want to be someone they can be proud of." Rachel's expression softened and she nodded. "That's the first step, Timmy. Knowing why you're doing this. It's not going to be easy. People are going to doubt you and you'll face rejection. But you've got the drive. You just need to stay focused." For the next hour, they went over his goals, discussing ways to sharpen his skills, how to network effectively, and how to get his foot in the door in a world that wasn't always welcoming to outsiders. Rachel gave him a few leads, some auditions, to consider, and even a couple of people to reach out to. When the meeting ended, Timmy walked out of the cafe feeling like his world had shifted once again. It wasn't going to be a smooth ride. He would face rejection, struggle, and doubt, but he had taken the first real step in his journey. He could do this. Over the next few weeks, Timmy threw himself into his work. Every day after school and his part-time job, he dedicated hours to learning new skills, taking acting classes, and attending auditions. He worked with a personal coach Rachel had introduced him to, a man named Ben, who helped him fine-tune his technique. Keanu checked in on him periodically, offering words of encouragement and giving him valuable advice on how to navigate the entertainment industry. But despite all his hard work, things weren't happening as quickly as he had hoped. There were a few small successes, a couple of auditions, some callbacks, but nothing big. The pressure was starting to mount, and Timmy began to feel like he was just one small mistake away from losing everything. One night, after a particularly tough day, Timmy sat in his room, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. He had been so focused on proving himself that he had forgotten why he started this journey in the first place. He wasn't just doing it for the fame or the success. He was doing it for his family, for the people who had supported him when no one else did. Just as he was about to call it quits, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Keanu. "Keep pushing, Timmy. The breakthrough is just around the corner. Trust the process. You've got this." Timmy stared at the message, feeling a sense of calm wash over him. Maybe it wasn't going to happen overnight. Maybe he wouldn't get everything he wanted right now. But Keanu was right. He had to trust the process. Timmy wiped his tears and picked up his phone again. He wasn't giving up. Not now. Not ever. What will happen next for Timmy? Will he continue to face obstacles that seem impossible to overcome, or will his persistence finally pay off? Make sure you're subscribed to follow along on his incredible journey. The best is yet to come. Timmy could feel the exhaustion in his bones, but something inside him kept him going. Weeks turned into months, and the struggle of his new life weighed heavily on him. Though the occasional audition and callbacks kept him hopeful, it felt like he was always just on the edge of something big, but never quite able to grasp it. The dream of changing his life, of helping his family, seemed as distant as ever. Then came the day that would change everything. Timmy had just finished another grueling audition for a role in a small independent film. He had nailed the lines, delivered his best performance, but as always, the waiting game was unbearable. After he left the casting office, he checked his phone. No messages. Nothing. He sighed, leaning against the cold brick wall outside the building, feeling more defeated than ever. His phone buzzed again. It was a text from Rachel. "Call me, it's important." His stomach churned. Was it another rejection? Had he not done enough? He swallowed the lump in his throat and dialed her number. "Timmy," Rachel said, her voice unusually serious, "I have some big news for you. It's not the easiest conversation to have, but I think you're ready. One of the directors I've been in touch with is looking for someone for a major role. It's a huge break, but it's not going to be simple. The competition is fierce, and they're looking for someone with the raw authenticity you bring. They've seen your auditions and they want you." Timmy's heart skipped a beat. "Wait. What? Are you serious? You mean I've got a chance at a lead role?" Rachel paused. "Not just any role, Timmy. This could change everything for you. But it's not a normal audition. They've asked for a private meeting with you. They want to see if you've got the kind of depth they need." "You've got to be ready for anything." Timmy could barely believe it. A lead role. This was everything he had worked for, everything he had hoped for. But it also felt overwhelming. The pressure to succeed, the fear of failing in front of the people who held the key to his future, was intense. "I don't know if I'm ready for something like this," Timmy admitted, his voice shaking. "What if I screw it up? What if they see I'm just a kid from the wrong side of town? What if they realize I don't belong?" Rachel's voice softened. "Timmy, this is your moment. You've done the work. You've proven yourself. Now, you need to trust in what you've learned and trust in yourself. You belong just as much as anyone else. Don't let fear stand in your way." Timmy stayed silent for a moment, letting her words sink in. He could feel his pulse quickening, his breath shallow. This was the moment he had been waiting for, but it was also the moment he feared the most. He had spent his whole life believing he wasn't enough, but here he was, about to stand in front of some of the most important people in the industry. Finally, Timmy took a deep breath. "Okay, I'll do it. I'll go. I'm ready." Rachel's relief was evident. "That's the spirit, Timmy. I'll make the arrangements. Get your head in the game and trust me, this is your time." As Timmy hung up, a mix of excitement and nerves flooded through him. He wanted this. He wanted it more than anything. But a fear gnawed at him. What if he wasn't enough? What if the world he had worked so hard to break into was too much for someone like him? That night, Timmy hardly slept. His mind raced through every possible outcome. He went over his lines, practiced in front of the mirror, and tried to block out the doubts. But with every passing hour, the weight of the opportunity bore down on him more heavily. When the day of the meeting arrived, Timmy put on his best suit, one that Rachel had helped him pick out, and headed to the studio where the meeting would take place. His stomach was in knots as he stepped into the sleek, polished building. The stark contrast between his humble background and the lavish world he was stepping into felt suffocating. He couldn't help but wonder if anyone would even give him the chance he needed. He was shown to a waiting room where he sat alone, feeling small and out of place. The polished floors, the expensive decor, the people who looked like they had been in the industry their whole lives. It was a far cry from the rundown apartment he had grown up in. But just as his nerves threatened to overwhelm him, the door opened. The director, a tall, poised woman with sharp features, walked in, followed by the casting agent and a few other important people. Timmy stood up, his palms sweaty, but his heart beating with purpose. "Timmy," the director said, smiling, "it's good to finally meet you. We've heard great things. Are you ready to show us what you've got?" Timmy nodded, feeling a wave of determination rush through him. It was now or never. He stepped forward, the weight of the world suddenly feeling lighter. As he began his audition, something shifted inside of him. The nerves melted away. He was no longer the kid from the wrong side of town. He wasn't the boy who had been kicked out of the mall. He wasn't even the boy who had been struggling for so long. In that moment, he was just Timmy. Raw, honest, and real. He poured every ounce of his soul into his performance, and for the first time in his life he didn't hold back. The room fell silent as he finished, and Timmy stood there waiting. His heart was in his throat, but he kept his head high, his chest proud. This was his moment. The director was the first to speak. That was incredible. Timmy couldn't believe it. His mind was spinning, and the words barely registered. "Señor Taros, you mean it?" The director nodded. "You've got something special, Timmy. We've seen a lot of auditions, but none like yours. You're exactly what we need. We want you for the role." Timmy's jaw dropped and his world seemed to freeze. For a second he couldn't speak, couldn't move. He had done it. He had finally done it. What will happen now that Timmy has secured his first major role? Will this be the turning point he has been working so hard for, or will the pressure become too much to handle? Find out in the next chapter. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the exciting conclusion to Timmy's journey. Timmy's life had just changed in ways he never imagined. The offer for the lead role was beyond anything he could have dreamed of, and as he sat in the car after leaving the studio, the reality of it all started to sink in. He had done it. He had finally broken through. He wasn't the kid that no one believed in anymore. He wasn't just another forgotten dreamer. He was a real actor now, and the world was his oyster. But as the exhilaration of the moment settled, doubts crept back in. Was he really ready for this? Was he prepared for the massive responsibility that came with such a big role? It was one thing to land a small part, but this was different. This was a major production, a film with a massive budget, and the eyes of the industry were now watching him. The stakes had never been higher. That evening, as Timmy sat in his apartment, a moment of quiet reflection took over. He thought about everything he had been through to get to this point. The countless hours of practice, the sacrifices, the rejections, the late-night phone calls with Rachel, and of course, Keanu's support. None of this would have been possible without them. His thoughts turned to his family. His mum, who had worked so hard to provide for him and his sister, often sacrificing her own happiness for theirs. And his sister, who had always believed in him, even when he didn't believe in himself. They had always been his driving force, the reason he kept pushing even when everything seemed impossible. Timmy picked up the phone and dialed his mom's number. She picked up on the second ring, her voice warm and familiar. "Hey, baby, how's everything going?" she asked, as if she hadn't just heard the news. Timmy smiled, his heart swelling. "I did it, Mom. I got the lead role, the big one. I'm going to be in a real movie. They want me." There was a brief silence on the other end before his mom's voice broke through, choked with emotion. "Timmy, I knew you could do it. I knew you had it in you." Tears welled up in Timmy's eyes as he heard the pride in her voice. He had done it, not just for himself, but for her, for his family. They had supported him through everything, and now it was finally paying off. "I'm going to make you proud, Mom," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Everything I do from here on out is for you and for Emily. I'm going to take care of us. I promise." He could hear her sniffle on the other end of the line. "I'm already proud, Timmy. You've always been enough. But now the world will see it too." Timmy's heart swelled with love. He could feel the weight of the years of struggle, the uncertainty, and the hardships lifting off of him. For the first time in a long while, he felt like he could breathe. Next few days were a whirlwind of preparation. Timmy began meeting with the film's producers, the director, and other cast members. He was getting his first taste of what it was like to work at a professional level, and the experience was overwhelming, in a good way. He was learning fast, soaking up every piece of advice, and trying his best to stay grounded, knowing that this was just the beginning. Keanu was there for him every step of the way. He checked in regularly, offering tips and sharing stories of his own experiences, both the successes and the failures. "Stay humble, Timmy," he reminded him one afternoon, as they spoke on the phone. "It's easy to get caught up in the hype, but remember why you're doing this. Keep your feet on the ground and always stay true to yourself." Those words stayed with Timmy throughout the entire process. He worked harder than he ever had before, showing up early and leaving late, never taking a moment for granted. He wasn't just trying to succeed, he was trying to prove to everyone who had ever doubted him that they were wrong. But more than that, he was trying to prove it to himself. Weeks later, the day of the premiere arrived. Timmy stood backstage, waiting for the moment when he would walk the red carpet. His heart pounded in his chest as he glanced at the flashing cameras, the crowds of people, and the other actors dressed in their glamorous outfits. It felt surreal. This was the life he had always dreamed of, but now that he was living it, it was almost too much to process. He looked down at the invitation in his hand. "You belong here," it read. The words seemed so simple, yet they carried so much weight. They weren't just words on a piece of paper. They were a reminder that he had earned his place in this world. He had fought for this moment. "Timmy, you're up," someone called from behind him. With a deep breath, he stepped forward, the noise of the crowd growing louder with each step. As he walked out onto the red carpet, the flash of cameras blinded him momentarily, but it wasn't the flashes that caught his attention. It was the faces in the crowd, people who were staring at him, cheering for him, recognizing him. They weren't looking at the boy from the wrong side of town anymore. They were looking at Timmy, the actor, the person who had made it against all odds. Keanu was there too, smiling proudly from the sidelines. He gave Timmy a thumbs up as if to say, "You did it, kid. You made it." Timmy smiled back, feeling a sense of peace wash over him. This was his moment. But more than that, it was his family's moment. This success wasn't just his. It belonged to everyone who had ever believed in him, everyone who had helped him get here. As the night went on, Timmy reflected on everything that had brought him to this point, the struggles, the failures, and the small victories. He realized that the journey wasn't about the destination. It wasn't about the fame or the money. It was about proving to himself that he could overcome anything. And in the end, that was the greatest victory of all. What's next for Timmy? Will his newfound fame and success change him, or will he stay grounded and true to the person he's become? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more of Timmy's journey. The best is yet to come. As Timmy's career skyrocketed, it felt as though the world was changing at an overwhelming pace. Every day, new doors opened, opportunities flooded in, and people who had once looked past him were now eager to work with him. The whirlwind of his newfound fame brought an overwhelming sense of exhilaration, but with it, a new kind of pressure. Timmy never imagined the attention would be so intense, but it was. Interviews, press conferences, fan meet and greets, and countless promotional events began to fill his schedule. He had always dreamed of this, but it was a dream he hadn't fully prepared for. There were days when the noise of it all felt suffocating, and in the quiet moments, he'd wonder if this was really what he had wanted. But then he thought of his family, of his mother's sacrifice and his sister's unwavering belief in him, of Rachel, who had believed in him before anyone else. He couldn't let the whirlwind pull him off course. He had worked too hard for this, and he wasn't going to lose sight of who he was. He wasn't going to let the fame change him. He couldn't. One night after a particularly exhausting event, Timmy found himself alone in his apartment, staring out at the city lights. The silence felt foreign, and for the first time in a while, he felt a pang of loneliness. Even with the bright lights and the flashing cameras, he still felt like there was something missing. He pulled out his phone and texted Rachel. "I need to find balance. It feels like I'm losing myself in all of this." Within minutes, she called. "I knew you'd be feeling this way. Fame can be a tricky thing, Timmy, but it doesn't have to define who you are. The key is to stay true to your roots, stay grounded. Remember what brought you here. It was never the fame, but the passion and the love for what you do. That's what matters." Timmy listened carefully to her words. She was right. He had started this journey because of his love for acting, because he had a story to tell, not because he wanted the world to know his name. The validation from others had always been secondary. It was his passion, his authenticity, that had gotten him to where he was. "Thanks, Rachel," Timmy said, a weight lifting off his shoulders. "You're right. I just need to remember why I started this in the first place." He ended the call with a renewed sense of purpose. He wasn't going to let the distractions of fame drown out his true calling, and as much as the world around him was changing, He wasn't going to change who he was. Over the next few months, Timmy started taking a step back from the hectic pace of his career to refocus. He took more time for himself, reconnecting with old friends and spending quality time with his family. The balance he was striving for didn't mean stepping away from his career, but rather grounding himself in the things that mattered most. The work remained important, but so did the people who had always supported him. One evening, Timmy found himself sitting with his mom, having dinner in their small kitchen, just like the old days. The walls of the apartment still felt familiar, despite everything that had changed. His mom looked at him, a smile spreading across her face. "You've done so much already, Timmy. I couldn't be prouder of you." Timmy smiled back, his heart full. "I've done it for you, Mom. For Emily. For all of us." He realized then that all the success, all the fame, didn't matter as much as the love and support of the people who had always been there for him. They were his real treasures, his grounding force in this whirlwind of change. As Timmy's career continued to soar, he found new ways to use his platform for good. He started working with charities and mentorship programs for kids from disadvantaged backgrounds, wanting to give others the same chance he had been given. One day, at a charity event, Timmy found himself speaking to a room full of young, aspiring actors. He shared his story with them, just as he had once shared his struggles with Rachel. "You don't have to come from a rich family or have connections," he told them. "You just need to believe in yourself and keep pushing, even when things get tough. Because trust me, if I can do it, so can you." He looked out at the sea of eager faces and felt a sense of fulfillment wash over him. He had not only changed his own life, but he was also helping others believe in themselves. It was the perfect way to give back, to show the next generation that their dreams were possible, no matter where they came from. As the years went on, Timmy's career continued to flourish, but his journey was never just about the accolades or the fame. It was about the people he had met along the way, the lessons he had learned, and the personal growth he had experienced. But perhaps the most important lesson of all came from the one person who had been there for him from the very beginning. Keanu Reeves. "Timmy, you've come so far," Keanu said to him one day after a long shoot. "But always remember, no matter how big you get, you're still just a person. Stay humble, be kind, and never forget who helped you get to where you are." Timmy nodded, his gratitude for Keanu's mentorship growing every day. He knew he had found not just a mentor, but a friend who had shown him how to navigate the ups and downs of this unpredictable world. And so, as Timmy stood at the peak of his career, he realized that this was just the beginning. The future was full of endless possibilities, but no matter where it took him, he would always remember the people, the struggles, and the journey that had brought him to this point. Now the question remains, what do you think Timmy's next big step will be? Will he continue to balance fame and humility, or will the pressures of stardom change everything he has worked for? We want to know what you think. Share your thoughts in the comments below. And remember, the journey is never truly over. There's always more to come. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button because the best is yet to come. The spotlight was still on Timmy, but he had learned that the true test of success wasn't in the flashing cameras or the glitz and glamour. It was in finding purpose and balance in the midst of all the noise. As his career grew, he began to realize that the real challenge wasn't just about landing the next big role. It was about pushing himself to evolve, to explore new avenues, and to remain true to the reasons why he started in the first place. Timmy had been getting more offers than ever, but the more projects he took on, the more he started to feel the weight of his choices. He wasn't just an actor now, he was a brand, an inspiration to so many who looked up to him. The pressure to be perfect, to always smile for the cameras and to maintain his image began to wear on him. He found himself wondering if he was still acting because he loved it, or if he was doing it because it was expected of him. Late one evening, after wrapping up a particularly exhausting promotional tour for his latest film, Timmy found himself sitting in a quiet cafe. The rain pattered lightly against the window as he stared into his coffee cup. It was moments like this, quiet, still moments, when the weight of it all would hit him. Suddenly his phone buzzed. It was a text from Rachel. How's everything? Going? You've been awfully quiet lately. Timmy took a deep breath and replied, I'm starting to feel like I'm losing myself in all of this. There's so much pressure to keep going, to always be on, and I don't know if I even know who I am anymore. Rachel's response came quickly, as though she had been waiting for him to open up. I get it. Fame can make you feel like you're living someone else's life, but you're not. You've always been real, Timmy. Don't let anyone take that from you. You need to reconnect with what you love. Don't be afraid to step back, even if just for a while. Find your own path, not the one people expect of you. Timmy read her words over and over, and for the first time in a long time he felt a sense of clarity. Rachel was right. He had been so caught up in meeting the expectations of the world that he had forgotten to check in with himself. He needed to reconnect with his love for acting. Not for the accolades, not for the fame, but for the sheer joy it brought him. A few days later, Timmy made a bold decision. He decided to take a brief hiatus from acting. He wasn't quitting, but he needed time to focus on himself. He didn't want to lose the passion that had driven him to pursue this career in the first place. It was time to rediscover his love for the craft, without the noise of the industry. During this time off, Timmy spent more time with his family and friends, especially Rachel, who had always been his rock. They took weekend trips to the countryside, far away from the chaos of the city. Timmy rediscovered the simple joys of life, enjoying a quiet walk in the park, cooking dinner together, and having deep conversations with people who knew him, for who he truly was, not just the actor. But perhaps the most significant part of his break was reconnecting with his roots, with the struggling, determined kid from the small neighborhood who had never dreamed he could make it this far. He revisited old spots from his childhood, and every corner reminded him of the grit and tenacity that had gotten him here. As he took time away from the spotlight, Timmy also took the opportunity to study the craft in a new way. He took acting workshops, spent time studying the greats who had inspired him early on. Actors like Al Pacino, Meryl Streep, and Robert De Niro. He went back to basics, reminding himself of the powerful connection between actor and character, the raw emotion that made acting more than just a job. It was an art. He knew that if he wanted to be great, he had to understand the craft in its purest form, away from the distractions. And so he gave himself permission to evolve. The decision to step back from the limelight was one of the best choices Timmy had made. When he finally returned to acting, it wasn't out of obligation, but out of genuine passion. His new role, a dramatic and deeply emotional film about personal loss and redemption, allowed him to explore a side of his craft he hadn't touched before. He poured his heart and soul into the character, and it showed. Critics were impressed, and audiences were moved, but more importantly, Timmy felt fulfilled. He no longer felt like a puppet in the machine of fame. He felt like an artist again. For the first time in a long time, Timmy was doing it for himself. It was during this period of personal growth that Timmy received a call that would shape the next phase of his career. The film was called The Long Road Home, and it was a deeply emotional, character-driven story about an actor's journey to rediscover his humanity after years of chasing fame. The character was far from the charming, likable roles he was known for. It was gritty, raw, and real, and the role was a perfect challenge for him. But the real twist came when the producer, who had worked with some of the biggest names in Hollywood, said something that caught Timmy off guard. We've been watching your growth over the last few months, Timmy. We know you've taken time off, and that's exactly why we want you. We believe that true greatness comes from those who are willing to grow and evolve. We need someone who has seen both the highs and the lows, and you're that person. We want you for this role, Timmy. Not just the actor, but the real you. Timmy paused, feeling the weight of their words. It wasn't about the fame anymore. It wasn't about who he had been or who people thought he should be. It was about his journey. It was about his heart. And for the first time in a long while, he realized that this was exactly the kind of challenge he needed. What's next for Timmy? Will this role allow him to solidify his place as one of Hollywood's greatest? Will he continue to balance the demands of fame with his personal growth? Or will new challenges and obstacles come his way? Only time will tell. But one thing is certain: Timmy's journey has just begun. What do you think is next for Timmy? Will he continue to evolve as an actor, or will the pressures of Hollywood force him to face new challenges? Let us know your thoughts below. Remember to like, comment and subscribe to see how Timmy's story continues to unfold. The journey is far from over. Stay tuned. The fame that once felt so foreign and overwhelming was now something Timmy was learning to navigate with grace. He had found a balance, not just in his career but in his life. The journey had been a roller coaster of highs and lows, but every twist, turn and challenge had shaped him into a person he was proud to be. Timmy had learned that success wasn't just about landing the next big role or winning awards. It was about staying true to oneself and not losing sight of what truly mattered. As the years passed, Timmy's career only continued to rise. But now it wasn't just the roles he was getting that excited him, it was the impact he was starting to have on others. Through his work with charities, his mentorship programs for aspiring actors, and his constant push for authenticity in Hollywood, he had begun to realize that the real legacy he was building wasn't one that would be defined by his name on a marquee. It was one that would be defined by the people whose lives he had touched. And yet, even with everything he had accomplished, Timmy knew that it would never truly be enough if he didn't take the time to reflect on what it all meant. As much as he had grown in his career, he had grown even more in his heart. It was a quiet evening when Timmy sat alone in his office, looking out over the city. The lights twinkled below, a constant reminder of the world that had been changed by his story. The fame, the fortune, the recognition, it all seemed so distant now. What mattered more to him were the people who had been with him through it all. His family, his friends, the mentors who had helped him when he had nothing. These were the relationships that had kept him grounded. And of course, there was Rachel, always by his side, a steady force of support and wisdom, guiding him through every decision, reminding him to never lose sight of who he was. Their friendship had turned into something more over time, and though neither of them had ever labeled it, there was no doubt that it was love. Not the kind of love people talked about in magazines, but the kind that ran deep and quiet, like the roots of a tree that held steady through the strongest storms. Timmy leaned back in his chair, his mind wandering through the years. The little kid who had once dreamed of being on stage, the teenager who had struggled to be noticed, the young man who had fought against the odds. He had come so far. He had made it. But it wasn't just about reaching the top. It was about how he had carried himself on the way up. He had always remembered his roots. He had stayed humble, even when the world was calling his name. He had been true to his craft, never compromising on his passion for acting, and he had learned how to balance fame with personal growth. But more than anything, Timmy had learned that the people who mattered most were the ones who loved him for who he was, not for what he had achieved. He didn't need to be perfect, and he didn't need to please everyone. He only needed to stay true to the journey he had started all those years ago. He stood up, walking to the window. The city stretched out before him, a world full of endless possibilities. There was so much more to accomplish, so many stories left to tell. But no matter what came next, Timmy knew that the greatest accomplishment of all was the person he had become. As Timmy gazed out at the world that had shaped him, he reflected on the lessons he had learned along the way. True success is not measured by fame or fortune, but by the love and support of those around you. The challenges you face in life are the very things that shape you into the person you were meant to be. Never lose sight of your passion, and always stay true to your roots. You can have it all, but only if you remember the people who helped you get there, and the values that brought you to this point. Even in the face of adversity, there is always hope, and there is always a way forward. Timmy's story was more than just a tale of fame and fortune. It was about resilience, about staying grounded, and about finding purpose in the midst of chaos. It was a story about finding your true self and using your platform for good. His legacy would not be one of trophies and accolades, but one of change, hope, and inspiration. What will the next chapter of Timmy's life look like? What challenges, successes, and growth will he experience as he continues his journey? Only time will tell, but one thing is for sure. Timmy's story is far from over. And so we leave Timmy here, standing at the window, looking toward the future, knowing that no matter where the road takes him, he has already made a lasting impact on the world. Now we want to hear from you. What's your take on Timmy's journey? How has his story inspired you? Do you think he will face new challenges, or will he continue to grow into the person he was meant to be? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Timmy's story may have come to a close, but your journey is just beginning. Stay tuned for more updates, and remember, it's not about where you start, but where you choose to go.